So Tony had this Umbro coat, and we were working together, and they put us out in plain clothes observations, just us two. And we were, as you can imagine, a bit thick as thieves, and we were thinking we were Starsky and Hutch all over Burnley Wood, Bruncher. And there was a report of a car that was travelling. It's either been nicked or a disqualified driver or something. And traffic cops, being traffic cops, were chasing this car all over the place. Tony, quick as a flash, said, listen, let's just go to the keeper's house, the registered keeper's house, and see if it turns up. So we're in this unmarked CID car, which obviously everyone knew was a CID car. We parked up round the corner, and this car turned up right outside the house. So we get out of our car. This lad gets out of the car. I don't know if it was drunk or disqualified or it's stolen or whatever, but it turned up, and we're thinking we're everyone. Tony says, I'll go and get him. You tell everyone to come and assist us. So I'm on the radio. Yeah, whatever call signs. This lad's here. Yeah, Tony was just going to detain the lad. And Tony, Jez, quick, just come and you go and get him. But yeah, Tony's just going to get him. There's no dramas. Tony, what's up? Let's go and get him. Just go and get him. I said, what's up? And this lad legged it. Look round, Tony had got his jacket fastened in driver's seat of the car. We'll see whether we can put that out there. That is 100% true story, that.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, dear.
It's a Tuesday night. We're trying to fire all these podcasts in, as many as we can, to get some people out there. I'm hosting this one tonight. I'm Jez. We've got Joe Martin and Joe Bernaduccio helping me out. They're doing a great job. It's working well for what we're getting out there, and it's so good that we're getting the feedback that we're getting, and that people are enjoying listening to old stories, funny ditties from the cricket club. Adam's the one who's behind all this. Yeah, we're putting our time into it, but Adam cuts and gets everything into a decent order so he can shift it out there on whatever medium we're listening to. So before we move on to tonight's special guest, Joe Martin, anything to report? Anything changed from the last time we chatted?
Has anything changed? Not really. Nothing to come back on yet.
Have you dressed up again at all or not?
No, well, but it's funny you should say that. On Friday, because it's the VE Day celebrations, or commemorations rather than celebrations, I guess, we are having an indoor street party within our house.
An indoor street party. Go on, explain.
So I'm cooking a full roast as a celebration. Roast chicken.
Right, okay.
With accompanying veg. And I think my sister's going to bake a cake of some kind.
What's the street bit of it?
Well, no. I imagined that because it was a bank holiday before the virus and disease, etc. I imagined that on the bank holiday people would have been having street parties to emulate what happened in 75 years ago. So this was my idea. Can I add? So we're dressing up. I'm going to put my suit on, and so we're going to have a go at that and see. I mean, we're very strange. I mean, but I'm happy. I mean, people know that, and I'm happy to sort of crack on with that. But apart from that, no, there's nothing of any note.
You eating okay?
Yeah.
So you're going out running every day still?
Yeah, running every day. It's very hilly where I live, so it's not easy. But yeah, running every day, doing little bits of work to keep things ticking over. I finished one set, and I don't have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to lie to you.
I can tell with the amount of times you're WhatsApping me. Anyway, Joe, we've enough of that. Dooch, what have you been up to over the last few days since we've last chatted?
Not a lot, Jez. Not much to report, really. Don't want to go on too long after Joe's intro there. People nodding off.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we'll move on to it then. We're going to continue. We've had lots of people come into us with regard how much they're enjoying it, how much they want to contribute, how much they disagree with some of the comments, and we've got some guests lined up over the next 2 or 3 recordings that I'm sure you'll all enjoy. Just to break it up a little bit from topics of from one season or particular pros or how the cricket went, we've decided to bring in a section or an episode called Famous Friends of Lowerhouse. Now, I'm sure Adam will add some sort of some music to the back of that.
Jay, I'm off, mate. See you soon. All right, mate.
Who was that?
Just a friend.
You've made a new friend? Oh, a friend? Since when have you had other friends? Oh, friend.
I knew him from when we was doing trials at West Ham. He's moved into the area. He's just some guy.
Some guy? Oh, he's just some guy. Oh, he's just some guy.
That's all it is.
Just a friend from when Jay had trials at West Ham that never happened. Don't forget the thumbs up. Oh, friend. Oh, new friend. Oh, friend. Please be my friend. Oh, friend. Oh, friend.
Fuck you lot. Where's the beer?
Gordon, send more house to save the house.
And tonight we've got one of the oldest friends within Lowerhouse, a real character who's got lots to talk to us about. We've got Tony Woodworth with us.
Well,
yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, just keeping busy, going out walking. What about you? Are you still working?
still working, Jez, yeah, unfortunately. Still classed as a key worker.
Right, yeah, I'm not surprised. That's good. We've got you on, Tony, just really to chat through about, how you came into Lowerhouse Cricket Club. I've probably known you now for 20 years, would you say?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I think it was when we first started working together, maybe 6 months or 12 months before that. And, it's been an absolute pleasure to know you and to be with you and be friendly with you, and to some of the times we've had together, whether it's sport or not sport, whether it's social. So really glad that you could come on and just chat about your career in sport, etc. Have you had a chance to listen to the podcast much over the Lowerhouse podcast?
I've listened to the last few, Jen, and I think they're absolutely outstanding, and like I say, great insight into the Lowerhouse and what goes on, and the camaraderie between the players over the years, and as we all know, it's in history how things have changed since I joined. Well, not just because I joined, things turned around. I'm not saying that.
Have you got any observations on any of the stuff that have come out the last few podcasts, Tony? Any of the stories that you've heard?
Yes, Joe, I have. Is that where you'd like me to just start?
Well, you can do, yeah. So you might as well.
Well, the first one, Joe, I was a bit disappointed in you saying that I wasn't very strong. Cricket wasn't my strongest forte. When, back in the day, in my schoolboy days, I opened the batting with Michael Atherton, and I like to think I earned that. But I had to make a decision, whether it be cricket or football, and unfortunately I chose football, which, looking back, I should have perhaps gone to cricket, but never mind. The second one, which I know people have tried to clarify, but first-hand experience was the Stan Eaton story at Rishton. It was a fantastic knock by Jacques Rudolph, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. We'd amassed 230 odd runs, and as you know, at Rishton, the changing rooms are virtually next to each other. And as much as Stan was captain, Stan wanted to rally everybody, but decided we were going to have a huddle on the pitch, which we'd never heard of in them days, which we did. We went out early, had the huddle on the pitch, and Stan was giving this Churchillian speech about, they've only got one batsman, they've only got Russell Worley. If we get Russell Worley, Pro can't bat, we'll roll these over, and so on. So we set that. I think Jez was bowling. It was only my third game in the first team, and set the field, and Stan was at goal. I don't know where he's got third slip from. Stan was at a gully position, and as Jez was about to run up, Blaise shouts across, Matt, do you think, after what we've said there, that Russell's only got one shot and he's going to give us a chance early on? Do you think Stan should be there? And at first I thought it was a good tack by Blaise to get into Russell Worley's head. and wind him up a little bit, which Stan bit and said, "No, I'm the best fielder, I've done this and I've done that." And of course, Jez bowls his first ball out swinger, wild slog by Russell, right off the edge, straight to him, and he spilled it. Where this 6 foot dive has come from, and it only left his hands when his elbows hit the floor, I do not know. And he was ridiculed from the side. I'll never forget 2 great stalwarts of the Lancashire League and Rishton Cricket Club, Eric Worley and Frank Martindale, were sat on a bench.
Yeah, they were, that's right, yeah.
Ridiculing Stan from that moment on, at which point it really, really got to him. And he turned around and Stan after a bit and he said, "Have you two not got a nursing home you can go and sit in?" Well, that's a bit of truth on that one. And I listened on my way into work this morning. I listened to Matt talk about the 2004 season. Well, I wasn't playing then, of course. Things had turned around and they were becoming a successful team. But I was quite interested in listening to Matt when he kept saying, "I can't remember many of the league games. I can't remember this. I can't remember that." And I've got an explanation for that as well. It's because after every game, me and Matt would probably have 10, 15 pints. And by midnight, we were sat on the bench on the corner of Greenbull Road, Lowerhouse Lane, waiting for Planet Pizza to deliver our supper. That's true.
If Matt wasn't there, Tony, there was the odd occasion they used to deliver it to your house, didn't they?
Oh, always. Always.
Yeah, they'd walk in and leave it on the...
Leave it. They had a key, I think.
Fantastic, Tony, fantastic. I love the observations and you're clearly all over this and listening to it and wanting to contribute like a lot of others. I'd like to just get into your career, your sporting career, as when you were a young lad. I've done a little bit of research, which I've never really done on you before, because obviously what you tell me is always the truth. And Tony does actually feature on Wikipedia. It says that Tony is a former professional footballer and was born in Manchester in 1968. It's quite scant then what it says, but it says Tony made his only first team appearance for Burnley in the 0-6 home defeat to Hereford United. Well, we know, Tony, there's more to discuss than just that defeat. And as you just mentioned there, how you played with Michael Atherton, probably something Joe Beneducci's never done after criticising you. But then you ended up playing Lancashire League cricket in the first team, and quite successfully, might I add. So I'd be interested to know, for me, Tony, I'm sure a lot of the other people who are going to listen to this, just describe how, as a schoolboy, later as a schoolboy, where you got into being a good enough player to be scouted and to become an apprentice or a professional footballer. Just tell us a bit of background about it.
Well, again, I'm from, as it's quite right, I'm born in Manchester, so I presume that Lancashire was very much, schoolboy football was the same as Manchester. We had a town team, which was Manchester Schoolboys, but you were allowed to play for Sunday teams as well. And in them days, if you were deemed good enough, from the age of 14, you could sign what they call affiliated schoolboy forms. I suppose nowadays they have the academies, but they take you a lot earlier. But 14 was the legal age that you could sign for a professional club, and that sort of tied you to that club for training. And then they had first option to sign you as an apprentice. As you can imagine, the clubs in that area, the big clubs, City United, and then you went down to Bolton, Oldham, Wigan, and I was fortunate to sign for Oldham at schoolboy forms, which again, like I say, tied me to Oldham up until they decided whether they wanted to sign me as an apprentice or not when I left school at 16.
Right.
Didn't really, as much as I used to go and train over at Oldham every week, they didn't really have a youth side as such, apart from the side that played in the FAU side. So game time was limited, and it was no surprise to me that just before Christmas 1983, I got released from Oldham, which then gave me the opportunity to go and have trials at other clubs. Now, I was playing on a Sunday for a side called Cheadle Town, which was a side run by two great fellas, Mike Walker and Alan Sherwood. Alan Sherwood had links to many professional clubs. And in the league that we played against junior sides for City and United. City had a side called Midas. And names you'll probably remember: Paul Molden, David White, Steve Redmond, all went on to play City's first team.
Yeah.
United's side was called Jubilee. So you're always playing competitive football. Scouts were always coming. And many times you get asked if you wanted to go for a trial or go and have a training session with them. Alan Sherwood had a friend who got me to go to a 2-week trial at Watford, which was, again, for a 15-year-old, it was an amazing experience. Graham Taylor was the manager, and they had an amazing side then. They had the likes of John Barnes, Nigel Callahan, Steve Sherwood with the goalkeeper. And one of the best moments for me in that first 2-week trial there, they had a guy called Alan Hodgkinson, who was a goalkeeping coach, and that's all you did for 2 days of the week, was just goalkeeping drills, and it were amazing. I got invited back again after that. In between, I'd been to York, I'd been to Crewe, and then I went back to Watford for another 2 weeks, which was just before they were going to the FA Cup final that year against Everton.
Right, yeah.
83, 84. So that club was amazing and very, very welcoming, very, very friendly, and somewhere that, if I had the chance, I thought I'd a technique.
When you were going, to these clubs, it's a long way away at Watford for a 14, 15-year-old. Was there a lot of junior footballers there? So you really were, in a big pond, or did you think you had a chance then?
Well, I was probably the only one who travelled as far, Jez. Obviously, Manchester to Watford. Down there at the time, there was a lot of Watford in the area, London.
Yeah.
That was one of the things. It was a massive club with a massive pool of players. So you would have been one of many, if you will.
Right.
And then right at the last minute, I was approached by a guy called John Doherty, who was a chief scout at Burnley. He invited me across to Burnley, and I came over to Burnley and had a couple of weeks trials here.
Right.
And then it came to crunch time, and I was offered YTS, a 12-month YTS at Watford, and I was offered a 12-month YTS at Burnley. Now, the distance for going to Watford was a determining factor. Like I say, a lovely club. Probably training facilities were a little better, but Burnley had a fantastic reputation for the youth system.
Right.
It was only down the road. And obviously, I was a big Man City fan. 1981, I'd been to Wembley to watch City at Wembley in the FA Cup final against Tottenham.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, in 1983, the management team of City's Cup final was now at Burnley with John Bond and John Benson.
Right.
Along with many of the Cup final squad: Jerry Gow, Tommy Hutchinson, Kevin Reeves, Dennis Stewart, Jerry Gow, Steve Daly. These were all at Burnley now. So
yeah, I do remember that, Tony. So what? I mean, I don't know why. The City staff, the backroom staff, came to Burnley. That obviously influenced you a lot, did it?
Well, amongst other things, Jez, like I say, the reputation Burnley had for the youth policy. It was never going to be as big a squad as Watford, so if we were going to have a chance, it was probably going to be at Burnley. And for 1 year, the proximity of Burnley to Manchester compared to Watford to Manchester, I think,
yeah,
that sort of swung it.
Yeah, yeah. So you signed up for the Clarets, the YTS for the Clarets.
Yeah, 1984. I'd been out of school probably 3 weeks when got brought over to Burnley to join. You know, and like I say, and I make no bones about this. It was a childhood dream to even have an opportunity to join a professional football club, and I'm sure many young boys dream of it. And I feel so privileged to have done it, and actually played for a club as fantastic as Burnley. Didn't turn out as well as what I'd like, but and I think you know what I can tell you and what I can talk about tonight is what a difference it was then, and probably what a poor state, through nobody's fault, what a poor state the club was in compared to how things have turned around now, and you know, and how well they are doing now, and the facilities they've got now.
Yeah, so you would have been then. Well, 84, you'd have been 16 and a half?
16, yeah, I just turned 16 in the March. Left school.
A house on Hollingreve Road, I believe.
Yeah, moved into digs. The club provided digs for you when you first come over. I moved in with a couple called Anne and Sam Burgess on Hollingreve Road. Again, lovely couple, very, very welcoming, looked after us. Unfortunately, Sam had been taken poorly, so Anne was preoccupied with looking after Sam quite rightly, but she still wanted to have the young footballers. And so there was me and another lad from Manchester called Carl Cloran, first year YTS, and also living there was a young professional called Phil Malley, who was a lad from Newcastle. I got very friendly with, and he did a lot for me and looked after me an awful lot in my time at Burnley. And it was really, it was straight into, you know, working life, if you will. People don't think it's work, but for a young lad just leaving school, it was straight into working life and doing stuff around the ground, which we'd not really knew anything about. And then all of a sudden, you're into this training regime of just running. But like I say, when there was a group, I think there was 8 of us that joined that year. Probably the most notable of our group was Ashley Hosking, who was a local lad from Huncote, went on to play the first team. There was a lad from Ireland called Peter Gray, 2 lads from Scotland, Donald Duncan and Gordon Conley. And there was another goalkeeper, a lad from Blackpool called Sean Gotto. There were 3 apprentices who were second-year apprentices. So that was the nucleus of your team. They'd had a clear out of most of the first team, but we still had some real names. Mickey Phelan were there, Derek Scott were there, Vince Overson, Billy Hamilton, Brian Flynn, Kevin Hurd had joined. And like I said, John Bond was the manager. So, you know, for my first few days of meeting them, it was unbelievable. You know, 3 years ago, I've been watching them at Wembley, and now you're sharing a football pitch and the changing rooms and a working environment with such people. But as a young apprentice, you soon realise that, you know, you're just a bit of a lackey, and the jobs that you had to do on a daily basis. You had to be at turf for 8:30 every morning. You might know these names, you might not, but George Bray, legend of the club. George was like kit man, and Muriel would have all the kit packed ready in bags. We'd have to load it onto the minibus, get down to go. Am I boring you, Joe?
Me? No, I'm trying to plug my charger into my laptop because it had fallen out. Never bore me, T.
Get down to Gawthorpe, you'd have to put the kit out. You know, every player would have his own towel, jockstrap, shorts, you know, various sizes for various people. You'd have to get the boots ready. You'd have to have a big pot of tea ready for them for when they walked in. Make sure the balls were pumped up. You had to make sure the bibs were clean. You know, you had all these whole task of jobs to do, and that's before you did any football and before you did anything yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when you think back, you know, you look at what's, I mean, I dare even say, and Joe Martin might come in with this now, you know, our juniors and our young section don't do that down at cricket club now.
No.
And they're amateurs. I don't know what you think, Joe Martin. What you think of that as a professional sportsman? I
think it's a really valid point you make there, Jez, because I think when in maybe the 80s or the 90s, I think that the juniors at the club, or, you know, the younger players at the club were probably not as intense as what Tony would have had it at a professional football club, but probably would have had a similar role, I imagine. You know, they'd be putting flags out and stuff and stumps and whatever. Whereas now I think we can't really do enough for them.
No,
You know, it's
and it's we're not saying whether it's right or it's wrong, but you're right. Myself and Stan and Roger Bromley and other people used to have to put these nets up at the cricket club. And there were poles you had to hammer into the ground, and then there were guy ropes that held them all up. And Iggy used to come in and complain if they weren't just right. But that's probably the role of society. Tony, you are renowned for your humour and what a character, and maybe some would say a prankster. Did you learn anything in those early days, as far as what you brought forward with you when you were only 15 and 16 from these older, experienced players?
Again, you look back and people do call that time of the football club as being the worst times of the club's history, and I can fully understand that. But from my time being there, I can honestly say every one of them give their all. Maybe we just weren't good enough as a group, but they were a fantastic bunch of players, and I think all they ever did was give the best and give 100%, which is I think speaks a lot. One thing I did, and it nearly cost me my job, was we used to have to go across to, because we were on YTS, you had to do a Wednesday afternoon education.
Right.
And ours were at Blackburn Rovers, so we had to go over to Blackburn Rovers every Wednesday afternoon and have this session with the Blackburn apprentices. And as you say, a bit of a prankster. I emptied a salt pot into a player's pocket, and he took exception to it and emptied it onto the Blackburn Rovers flag or emblem in the carpet, and it all kicked off. So we all got paraded. On the next day, and I held my hand up, which was probably the best thing to do. And it taught me a lot that if you've done something wrong, hold your hand up, because I held my hand up, it was like a warning. But I can imagine if I'd denied it. Yeah. So that was a calm me down for a little bit, but soon got over.
So then we, as you said, 1984, there's some great players still there when you look at the names of them. But you're right in, goodness knows, I don't know whether you knew what were going on in the background. You're obviously only very young then, whether you've looked at it since. I certainly don't know why it went through that stage. Because how many managers went through that next 2 or 3 years, Tony?
Well, you're right there, Jez. I mean, it's only probably after I'd left and 10, 15 years later, when you see how the club had turned around, that you realise how bad things were. In relation to managers, like I say, I went in 1984. John Bond was the manager. John Benson was his assistant. Never really got to see John Bond that much. And after pre-season, he resigned for whatever reason, I don't know. John Benson was given the job for the next season, and he had a guy called Ian McFarlane work with him. Kevin Reeves was badly injured. I think he'd broken his hip, so he couldn't play first team. So he sort of took on the role of youth team coach after the end of that season. So that was the 84-85 season, which they were relegated from Division 3 to Division 4. They then lost a lot of players. Mickey Phelan went to Norwich. Vince Olsen went to Birmingham, I think. Derek Scott went to Bolton. So it was a really, really depleted squad then. And it was clear they had limited funds, 85, 86. Martin Buchan was appointed manager. He brought with him Tommy Kavanagh. Tommy Kavanagh was renowned or famous for being the right-hand man to Tommy Dock at United. Martin Buchan was a lovely fella, but again, for some reason, whether it was pressure, he packed in after pre-season, so never really got into it. Tommy Kavanagh took on the role of manager for that season. He sort of took Joe Gallagher with him as his right-hand man. And then Tommy Kavanagh packed in at the end of the 85-86 season, and Brian Miller came back 86-87, when again we had a really, really depleted squad. And probably through that Tommy Kavanagh season, it was probably one of the best for me, because that's when I was offered professional terms and signed my professional contract. But also, Tommy Kavanagh hated losing and pulled. We had the Central League side, which was obviously the reserves, and Tommy Kavanagh hated losing, and our reserve side were forever getting beat. But the experience you used to get from playing in that Central League was unbelievable, and a stepping stone to the first team, because you were playing alongside your pros that were coming back from injury, or you're playing against pros that were coming back from injury, and playing at a very, very good standard of football on football grounds. So when Tommy Kavanagh pulled the side out of that and then he resigned because he was having health problems, it left the gulf between first team and the youth team. So there was no in between. So you were going from under 18s to the first team, which was a massive, massive gulf. And again, that's when the club, you realise the club was in dire straits really, because we had, as a youth team, you had no structure. You know, bless him, Arthur Bellamy, a fantastic fella and a fantastic servant to the club. He was like tripling up as Brian Miller's assistant, the groundsman at Gawthorpe, and running the youth team during the week. They had no dedicated coach for the youth team that played in the Lancashire Youth League on a Saturday morning, and it got that bad where, you know, players who weren't involved in the first team squad would have to take the youth team on a Saturday morning. Really didn't really have any interest in it or any knowledge, or, you know, which was a bit demoralising for the young lads. But that's how it was. And when you look back, and I mean, you look what they've got today, and I'm not knocking the kids who are there today. I'm not knocking the club, but you know, I had a quick look at the thing today. The under 18s have a coach, an assistant coach, their own physio, their own strengthening coach. The under 23s have the same. You know, we couldn't even have one coach.
Thompson has it just outside the D. Thompson shoots! Burnley are 2-0 up. They lead 3-0 on aggregate. And Burnley are Wembley bound. It's Thompson's volley above Marcus Hanneman. The Clarets have never won in the Medeski Stadium. They're on course to win tonight. I follow Burnley, I'm proud of it. We sing wherever we go. I'll fly the flag for my hometown, yo. It's up to Wembley we go. We are Burnley FC. Oh, I love you so. Over here, Burnley FC, and I'm so proud to be Burnley FC. How I love you so. Over here, Burnley FC is your home.
I was just going to say, you mentioned about signing your professional terms. How does that work? How did it work then? Somebody tell you what your wage is going to be? Obviously, you wouldn't have had an agent. Is it
No.
just, does that conversation take place between you and the manager, you and somebody else? How does it work?
No, it did then, Joe, and it's interesting. And I mentioned this lad before, Sean Gotto. We both joined at the same time. And again, if I'm brutally honest, Sean were progressing probably better than me. And he was probably a better goalkeeper than me. Unfortunately, when it came to decision time, Sean was a bit older than me, so they had to make the decision about Sean first. And I was convinced he was going to get offered professional terms, which really would have kiboshed my chances of a professional contract. And like I say, Tommy Kavanagh was the coach, and he was very, very old school, was Tommy Kavanagh. And he hated goalkeepers wearing gloves because, you know, in his day, it was a pair of cotton gloves or nothing. And he used to make us train with no gloves on, and it was really, really difficult. And Sean, this particular day, had a nightmare in training, and Tommy Kavanagh giving him so much stick, which he did. You know, he did that regularly, but then he would, you know, as soon as the whistle went to say training was over, that was it, everything was forgotten. He was your best mate. But he used to call you like Al Jolson and, you know, get them fucking gloves off and all. Anyway, Sean had had a really bad morning and booted a ball in anger, and it hit Tommy Kavanagh on the back of the head. and I can only guess that was the end of his career, because. And miraculously, he didn't get offered a contract, which was a shock to me, and I'm sure it must have been a shock to him. And then I got picked, probably the week after, I got picked to play in the FA Youth Cup fixture against United at Turf. We got beat 2-0, but again, I had one of them games where everything they hit towards the goal, I stopped, whether I knew about it or not, and I got taken in the next day by Tommy Kavanagh, and he said, I want to offer you a professional contract now. Initially, they only offered me the contract to the end of the season. And you're right, Joe, no, we didn't have agents then. You could have contacted the PFA, but I didn't feel it was worthy of contacting the PFA. So I spoke to Joe Neenan, who was the first team keeper. I explained to him what they'd offered, and he just said, well, you know, to be honest, he says, you want another year. if you can get this season and another season, he says, then, you've not got a bad do. So I went back and asked them if they would consider giving me the additional season, and they came back and said yes. So it was very much, they told me what they were offering me. It was up to me whether I accepted it or not.
And what were you then? 17?
Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, isn't it? A 17-year-old lad having to negotiate with these hardened professional sportsmen in the contracts. How times have changed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they get agents virtually now as soon as they signed a professional contract. It's.
Tony, don't answer this if you don't want to. But how much was it for?
My first year was £50 a week, £50, but the club paid for me digs.
All right, happy days. But didn't buy you boots or goalie gloves?
No, they didn't.
Allowed them.
When you were an apprentice, you used to get a chitty for £30, which you could take to a sports shop in Burnley. So it was either Malcolm Yardley's or on Hall Street or Cockers. They were your choices. And you used to get £30 twice a year to go and get your boots. And obviously as a keeper, I got an additional 30 to go and get some gloves. When you signed in the professional ranks, it was down to you. And you were given a list of contacts for Nike or Adidas. And you can imagine the Dear John letters that I got when I wrote asking if they were interested in sponsoring Tony Woodworth at Burnley. I think I've still got one of the letters from Nike, actually.
Those vouchers they used to give you, the £30 vouchers, is it right? Once you got your first one, the 6 months later you went in and says, "Are a chance for one for Belfield's chipper?"
Belfield's wasn't all right, Joe. Belfield's wasn't open then, Jez. It was Todd Road. I used to go.
Todd Road chipper. So Tony, you sign your first contract. You're there. You're now in the first team. It's quite unbelievable that you've got a first team squad of whatever, 15, 16, 17 players, and then a few injuries, suspensions. The club have nothing to call on, but basically youth team. What was your first experience of the first team and being involved with these top professionals?
The first real experience I had was beginning of the 85-86 season. Martin Buchan had just packed in. Tommy Kavanagh had taken over. And I don't know whether you remember this, but they used to take part in a pre-season trophy called the Lancs Manx Cup. And it was all the Lancashire teams, and then the final, you got to the final, you'd get to go and play on the Isle of Man in an exhibition game. And in beginning of 85-86 season, Burnley got to the final against Blackburn Rovers at Ewood. And obviously in them days, it was only one sub.
Right.
Not like they have now, they have 5 subs and they've got to have a sub-keeper, or they can have a sub-keeper. But they relaxed it for that game to say that because it's a pre-season competition, you could go to, you could have subs. So I was named on the bench at Ewood.
Right.
And in the lead up to the game, it was all, obviously I wasn't here at the time, but the last time they played at Ewood, the Burnley fans had wrecked the stand and brought the roof down and set it on fire. So there was all this hoo-ha about, how you've got to conduct yourself and how you've got to behave. And so that was my first involvement with the first team. When we got beat 1-0, I was on the bench, obviously warmed up on the pitch, caught on the pitch at half-time, obviously never going to play. And then, I can't think when it was, I think it was 86, I was a professional then, I'd signed professional forms, and I got told that I was in the squad to play at Exeter, April 86, and I had to be, Joe Neenan was injured. I had to be at Turf Moor for something like 6 o'clock in the morning. And again, just a sign of the times and how poor the club was. You didn't have, no player had his own tracksuit. It was a pool of Adidas tracksuit that the club had. And if you were travelling long distances, you got to wear one of these tracksuits. But because I was the youngest, I was left to the last to get my tracksuit. So everyone else turned up, got there, make sure it fit. And I was left with whatever was left, which didn't fit me. Probably fit me now, but didn't fit me. And I looked all right, going.
So John Enan's injured, Tony. So you think at this stage you're playing?
Yeah, I think I'm playing, and I only found out the day before. So nervous all the way down. I mean, nowadays they go the night before, don't they? Or, you know, all the way to Exeter. We were stopping at Weston-super-Mare for a pre-match meal, which was all new to me. So we get to this hotel, Weston-super-Mare. We sit down, and everyone's getting put in front of them. You know, waitresses are coming out, beans on toast, and Phil Malley had put his hand up and whatever. And there's a girl walking around with like scrambled egg on toast, and no one's taking it. And I'm thinking, well, I've not even ordered. Well, they've not even asked me what I want. And someone says, "Oh, Joe Neenan normally has scrambled egg on toast. that'll be Tony's." So again, you know, I just got what Joe Neenan had probably ordered, thinking he was going. And it was only then, from the journey from Weston-super-Mare down to Exeter, that Tommy Kavanagh spoke to me and said, you know, you do know you might be making your debut today. I've got every faith in you, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I'll speak to you when we get to the ground, which was, you know, you might be making your debut. I didn't really understand that. But when we got to the ground, they'd signed a guy called Dennis Peacock on loan from Doncaster Rovers. And he had all been, you know, kept hush-hush in case, you know, he never got approval or Dennis Peacock didn't want to join. But he did, so it was an experience. But I never played in that particular fixture. They won 2-0, and we had a good journey back in my big Adidas tracksuit.
Fantastic.
And then obviously we then move into the last season, which again was a very, very, very difficult season for everybody. Looking back, like I said, there was no Central League side. The squad was depleted when you look at it, and it was a difficult time. And coming into '87, at the turn of the year, we had a very, very, very bad frost, freezing conditions, so training was hard. And then the first team had arranged, if you remember, in them days, Preston North End had a AstroTurf pitch.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
And they managed to arrange to try and give them a bit of a run around and a proper match. Preston agreed to let Burnley use the pitch against a Blackpool side. Now Blackpool were 2 divisions higher than I think. Some great players: Paul Stewart, Alex Dyer, Sam Allardyce were playing. So the first team weren't in training. I was told to go and train with the youth players, which was a running day for them. So I went and did all the running, and then we were doing shooting, and then I suddenly get called by, I think it was Arthur Bellamy, who said, "Go and get your kit together, you need it at Preston." And I said, "Needed at Preston? Why am I needed at Preston?" He said, "Well, I think Joe Neenan's injured and there's no keeper." So I got taken over to Deepdale, full of mud, straight into the dressing room, straight out onto this pitch against Blackpool's first team, and we played this fixture. And I know you'll believe me, Jez, but others will. I had a really, really good game.
Yeah,
and we drew 2-2. So you know, Brian Miller was the manager. Said, "You did very well. Have every faith in you. No problem." Then the week after, we were in a trophy called the Freight Rover Trophy.
Yeah,
which again was local clubs and a chance to get to Wembley. And I was told that morning in training, you're playing tonight at Bolton, Burnden Park. So fortunately then I had a chance to tell my parents. My mum, my dad, my auntie Val all managed to get to Burnden Park. I got them tickets, and I was just overjoyed, you know, making my first team. Well, it was my first team debut. I know people don't see it, but for me, that was the pinnacle of my footballing career, and it just felt good to be part of the team. Bolton were a great side. They had an attacking duo in them days called Georgie Garney and Tony Caldwell, who was scoring goals for fun. Derek Scott were playing for them, and we went 1-0 down, which was not my fault. And then all of a sudden, probably about 30 minutes in, there was a fog started descending on Burnden Park, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I must admit, I didn't even know we'd equalised. But at half time, it was 1-1, and we go into the dressing room, we're having a cup of tea, And then, Brian Miller's giving us the talk saying, you're doing really well, just keep going, just keep playing. And, they're not causing any problems. Tony, you've got it sorted at the back. And referee comes in, he said, I'm calling it off.
Right.
What do you mean you're calling it off? He said, well, it's like, you can't see the other end. You can't, from the halfway line, you can't see the goal. Anyway, we went out and you couldn't. And there was no sign of it lifting, so it was abandoned. So that was that written off. And then, of course, that was on the 20th. That was on the Tuesday night. Had the day off on the Wednesday, training Thursday. And I just presumed Joe Neenan would be back fit for the weekend. He was in training on the Friday, thought nothing of it. Obviously, he had to report to the game on the Saturday as normal, so you had to be at the ground for 1:30, 2 o'clock. And
for a 3 o'clock kickoff.
3 o'clock kickoff, yeah. There were no meeting for meals or anything like that. It was straight to the ground, make your own way. And as a young pro, you used to get 2 complimentary tickets for every game. And there was always a gaggle of people at the players' entrance. Like, have you any tickets, Tony? Have you any tickets? And 9 times out of 10, I'd just give mine because parents never used to come over if I weren't playing. And on that particular game, a good friend of ours, Frank Entwistle, was stood at the entrance. Have you got any spare tickets, Tony? So I said, yeah. And this time I didn't know I was playing. So I goes in and Brian Miller took me to one side. He says, Tony, I'm sorry to drop this on you. He said, but you're playing today. Joe's not fit. He said, I'm sorry that you're not going to have time to get your parents over. And, no problem. I was trying to get my mind focused. Oh, my God, I'm playing. But, I did all right on Tuesday. Anyway, so I thought, right, I'm going to take these tickets down. And there's Frank at the end. So I give him the tickets, no problem. Off he tops. I go in, start getting ready. And by this time, the nerves are set. And this is now going to be my Football League debut. And there's no sign of fog. And that was that, Everyone was very, very good. The players, don't worry, you'll be fine. But, I was very, very nervous. Very, very nervous. One of the first things in them days, you could roll the ball out and get it back and pick it up. You could throw it across your box and run across and get it back off your defenders. Nowadays you can't do that. One of the first things I did, I threw it out to Darren Heason and he sold it short back to me, and I had to make a sliding save, which gave me a lot of confidence. And then Hereford scored against the run of play, and then probably where it started to really go wrong, the ball came over the top, and I set off to run out to clear it. I was going to boot it, and Ray Deakin, who was a very, very good player, shouted for me to go back. Now, in hindsight, I shouldn't have listened to him. I should have just carried on and wellied it, but I went back, and I was in no man's land, and I brought their forward down, and they got a penalty, and that was 2-0. And then the rest is history, Jez. I'd rather.
Tony, can you remember anything about the status of the game? Were they at the top of the league? Where were we? Was there anything?
No, we were
that you can remember about the game?
We were probably both languishing towards just above the bottom of the table, Joe, from memory. We were. I don't think at that time in January, I don't think we had any fears of being where we ended up. That was just again, I don't just say this, but at least 2 of the goals were just in the corner that you couldn't get anywhere near. I think they had a lad called Phil Stant who scored a hat-trick. But again, we were just all over the place. The defence were all over the place. I mean, 2 of the goals were one-on-ones. It was just one of them. Everything they hit went in, and it was what it was. 6-0 at home, Football League debut. Yeah, and after the game, Brian Miller, bless him, God rest his soul, a lovely, lovely man who did everything he could for Burnley. He just took me before I went into the dressing room. He took me into his manager's office. Don't worry about that. That's not your fault. You've got a great future at this club, and there'll be a contract for you at the end of the season. We see you as the future of the club. Which was reassuring. The players were brilliant, but unfortunately, I never got back in. Joe Neenan came back the week after. I think they got stuffed 4-0 the week after away Hartlepool or somewhere like that in the next game. Not that it made me feel any better. Joe played the rest of the season, and obviously Orient was the penultimate game, which was very, very pressurised. But then, of course, reality strikes, and I don't know how it works now with agents, but in them days, probably a week after the season was over, you all had to go into training, and you'd be called in one by one to discuss your future. And again, I remember speaking with Joe Neenan and Joe Neenan saying, you need to be looking for 2 years now at your stage of your career. You want to be looking for a minimum of 2 years. So I'm thinking, Brian Miller said I've got a good future. We said that, so I was devastated when I went in, and he said, look, we've looked at it, and because we don't have a Central League side, we don't feel we need a second goalkeeper, professional goalkeeper, because we've got the youth. We can have an apprentice goalkeeper, we can have a first-team goalkeeper, and if we need anybody, we can get someone on loan. So, and in them days, you're looking and saying, well, if it had been £100 a week, they just couldn't afford it. So I was released, and I don't know how true it was, but Joe Neenan had already agreed a contract. But when he found out I'd been released, he went back in and tried to renegotiate his, and Joe left, and that was the year they brought Chris Pearce back. Oh,
I was just having a look on there, Tony. I do remember now that it was the famous Orient game at the end of the season.
Mm.
There were 15,781 people on that Burnley Orient game, which is to be expected. Burnley needed to win to save their probably existence. Guess how many were on the game you played in?
1,961.
1,995, it says on this one I looked at. That's unbelievable, isn't it, Art? When you think of a stadium like Turf Moor, there's less than 2,000 on. That's bizarre.
And again, but the laughable thing about was I mentioned before, I'd give Frank. I didn't know Frank as he was. I didn't know him then, but I'd given Frank these tickets, and I'll never forget. We defended the cricket field stand in the second half, so. It would have been easy just to turn around and leg it up the tunnel, but it wasn't the right thing to do. Go and shake hands with the opposition referee. So he walked towards the centre spot, and I'm walking off, and I hear this voice shouting from the cricket field stand, "You fucking rubbish, Woodworth! Go and get a job!" And I look up, and it's the guy I've just given 2 fucking complimentary tickets to.
Gordon, send more house to save the house.
Oh, well, Tony, great experience and great, as we mentioned previously, I'm sure people who listen and be fascinated by your story and through that professional ranks. And if anyone's got any questions, then get them in WhatsApp, Twitter, whatever they need, and I'm sure you will look to answer them. But you moved on from there, Tony. You played quite a lot of non-league football, played football abroad, and it was clear that your career was destined for away from professional football, and that's where I think me and you met, and Stan Eaton met, in the Cops, and fortunately you came to to play cricket at Lowerhouse. I didn't know anything about your cricket when you were coming down to play, and it's only since that we've discussed about you were a good cricketer at schoolboy level. And I think it's fair to say you did offer a vast amount of to the club when you first came. Dude, can you remember when Tony first came down? Because you'll have played a bit of second team with him, would you?
I definitely remember playing second 11 cricket. I don't remember sort of meeting Tony at any stage. I remember batting with him at home in a game at Lowerhouse. So when that started or what time period that was, I wouldn't know, Jez.
No, but I think it's safe to say that so many people were impressed, and it was almost the professionalism that you brought into dressing rooms, and your keenness, and obviously your pranks and the different jolly japes that were going on within the dressing room, etc. And I'll never forget when, you got in the first team for those, for the 4 games that we played together, and everyone in the second team used to tell me about this, and they used to see it at the nets. We'd try and really have nets that were quite intense. And Tony, believe it or not, listeners, was an absolute master at tip and run. Never seen a batter. He would just, no matter what state of the game, stop the ball and run.
Yeah, it was always something that through my schoolboy cricket, it was always something that I was always taught. Keep the scoreboard turning over. Keep alternating the strike, and again, I was nowhere near. I look at some of the kids that you've got these days, and the quality of them, but I do feel that they miss so many singles and so many opportunities to score by being correct and or whatever. But who am I? But you're right. When I finished playing, I did have a choice to make. I had to make a choice between whether I'm going to try cricket. I was never as good at cricket as I was at football. So from 16, I probably didn't play cricket until I came down to Lowerhouse, which I must have been 30, around the 30s. So maybe late 20s. So it was great I think my first season from memory, I think Sean Flegler was pro. So whatever year that was. So I think Flegs was the first pro that I was sort of involved in the seconds. But tip and run. I used to say to him, all we've got to do is just tip and run.
95.
95 was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 95, 96 flag pro, 2 years.
Yeah, so trying to get the young ones to just see that there's runs everywhere. There's runs in the field, and they're not going to pick it up and throw your stumps down. And some of these young lads were so much fitter than what I was. I mean, I was a lot fitter in them days, but then it comes to bite you. On that game at Rishton, I'll never forget that. And I was so pleased to get asked to play in the first team for a number of reasons. And I'll never forget 2001, beginning of the 2001 season. Paul Stansfield had taken over as skipper.
Paul Stanley taking over as captain of the second 11.
Yeah. He didn't always see eye to eye with Stan's decisions, didn't Stanley? And on this particular occasion, he couldn't wait to tell me this story of him having a meeting to see, and Stan had brought up who we were going to have keeping wicket for the second team. And Stanley says, well, he said, I don't think there's any choice really. He said, I think we've got to go with Tony. Yeah. And Stan says, like, Tony Woodworth. And Stanley says, yeah, he's the best of what we've got. With no one coming through as youth, and he does a good job. And Stan says, yeah, but he's enormous. He's enormous. I wasn't then. But then going into, I used to have banter with Stan all the time. I used to play with Stan at football, in social stuff and all that. And he'd never agree with you on a footballing point. And I'd always just say to him, Stan, what standard have you ever played at? And it became a standing joke. So when I got into the first team at Lowerhouse, I think the first game was Ramsbottom at home, which we lost. Yeah. We then played Accrington away.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wasn't required to bat.
Yeah.
And then there was Rishton, and I was down to bat number 10. Yeah. And it was one of them games where Jacques were taking the side apart, but we were losing wickets quickly, trying to post the total. And it was clear my time was going to come. On padded up on the balcony, and Matt Stanley's in with Jacques. Jacques was probably 4 times as quick as Stanley, and there was no surprise when he ran Stanley out. Yeah. And I got up to go to walk down with about an over to go, and Matt Oates, who's captain, says to me, he didn't look me in the eye, he just said, Tony, he said, let Johnny go. And Johnny Russell, I'm thinking, Johnny Russell can't bat. Johnny Russell can't hold a bat. I can tip and run. I'm the best at tipping and running. So I never said anything. Obviously, a team player. Jacques sees the innings out. Johnny's not out when he comes in. We actually tie that game, as you know. And in the bar afterwards, I said to Matt, can I just ask you, peeved here? I said, but I just need to ask the question. And once you've answered it, I'll let it go. I said, can I just ask you why you put Johnny Russell in before me? He says, yeah, he can run.
They've no idea, have they?
They've no idea. No idea.
Tony, a lot of years after it happened, but would you like to admit to putting that pie under Terry Small's seat cover at Bake Up now or not?
Well, I'll turn it back on you, Joe. Now you know me a lot of years after. If I'd have had opportunity to do something with a pie, would I have stuck it under a seat of tea? Or would I have eaten it?
Yeah,
Good answer. Good answer.
Good point, Tony. Joe Martin, any observations about Tony's introduction to Lowerhouse Cricket Club?
Yeah, there's a couple of things for me. When he talks about tipping and running, it's something that we really struggle to coach at the cricket club with, in lots of age groups. And for me, it comes down to awareness. Tony, do you think that although it's a different sport, you have a perception of the game and some awareness of how things are moving within a game and when you played football? Do you think that helped you when you were playing cricket, or was it just something that you were learning when you were younger?
I think it was something that was drilled into me, Joe, to be honest. Right. And it was, in them days, it was a case of you've got to keep that. That's how you were taught. I mean, don't get me wrong. We didn't have the batting coaches like you guys give the kids these days. We didn't have the facilities. We didn't have bowling machines as such, and that's what were drilled into me. And don't get me wrong, I look at some of these kids nowadays, and the technique that they've got is absolutely amazing. But whilst I stood there holding the stance, for me, there could be a single.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we're looking at, sometimes we look at a scoreboard that we get stagnant in the middle of an innings. I just think we could turn it over. And I'll never forget when I started umpiring, as you know, and I think you might have even played in this game, Joe. It was a young district game.
Under 13s against Blackburn. Burnley versus Blackburn, wasn't it? Yeah. And
it was at Lowerhouse, and this lad came into bat for Darwin, Blackburn and Darwin. And like say 13 years of age, and he would knock in the ball and he'd say, yes, one, it's gone to his left hand, he's right-handed. And this went on through the game. He were brilliant. And it turns out it was Alex Davis, who now keeps wicket for Lancashire. And not saying that I was anything like Alex Davis, but that was just what I'd sort of been taught. That's how to play the game. I would never have been able to run and say, that's gone to his left hand and he's right-handed. There's a single there, but, the concept was the same, and I do think we do miss tricks in building scores and keeping the scoreboard ticking over by not taking these opportunities.
Well, it's funny. I completely agree with him. It's something that's not that I don't do massively in my game. I'm not very good at it. I don't have that sort of foresight, and I don't have that foresight in many things I do, to be honest with you. But it's funny you did mention that game, Tony, because Alex got 100 that game. I can remember it vividly. He got 103, I think, and I got 88. And
show off.
No, this is going to be a real sort of disparaging comparison. Is that the difference between me and Alex? Well, there were lots of differences between me and Alex Davis. He was good, but his ability to run between the wickets was something that I've never seen before. The majority of my runs came in boundaries or hitting them to deep extra cover, but it took me all innings to get 88. Whereas he was able to negotiate the field with ease.
But I suppose it's like anything, Joe. It's having the confidence to, And again, I look at the fielding standards in the Lancashire League first team now, and even in our own side with the likes of Charlie, you wouldn't want to risk taking a single to Charlie.
No.
And it's obviously knowing your field and knowing the standard of your opposition. And I think that's what Alex Davis had picked up like that. Whether he knew you guys, but he knew. Whether he just observations from, left hand, to his left hand, he's right-handed as a single.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's the best cricketer I've ever seen at that. And I mean, we were playing against him all the time. Darwin would beat us and he would win games on his own.
Yeah.
That's how good he was. The second thing, Tony, sorry everybody, but the second thing was, obviously you joined the police, and then how did that sort of move you to come into play for Lowerhouse? How did that sort of conversation negotiation go with?
Well, I don't think there was much of a negotiation, Joe. I'd sort of I think if I remember rightly, I wanted to get back into cricket. I'd been down to watch Lowerhouse a couple of times. And again, Jez, you might know this, the pro before Fleggs, was it Craig Light?
Yeah, Craig Light was 94.
Yeah, I think that's the first time I'd been down to watch. I didn't know anybody then.
Yeah.
And I'd been down to watch Lowerhouse a couple of times and then played at Belvedere for 12 months with your uncle...
David.
Yeah. And then I obviously met Uncle Stan, or knew Uncle Stan, and was introduced to Lowerhouse, which obviously we've never looked back.
Fantastic.
Tony, just a question, just going back a bit, if I can. You know, when you got released from Burnley,
Yes.
was there no thought of any other clubs or trying to make it elsewhere as a footballer, or was that it?
Yeah, no, there was, Joe. Again, it's so different now to what it was then. Obviously, we didn't have internet, we didn't have mobile phones, and like, I'm not blaming anyone. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. But like I say, you know, we dropped out the Central League. So my only, if you can call it, my only opportunity to play in the shop window was playing in a Lancashire youth game on a Saturday morning against City A team, United A team, or Southport Reserves, or anything like that. And again, you know, Brian Miller were very, very, very good to me, and he offered to give me references, and he even said to me, so, you know, if you want to come, if you don't get a club, come back and do pre-season training with us. We just can't pay you. Hindsight, I wish I'd have taken him up on that offer, because I think opportunities may have come. But for whatever reason, and I can't put my finger on it, I didn't. And again, you know, when you were at that stage of your career, you're a professional footballer, you were running every day, fit as a fiddle. Running was not a problem to me them days. But once you start losing your fitness, it is very, very difficult to get it back after not doing pre-season and so on and so on. I went playing at Morecambe. I can't think how long after that was, where Eric Worley was the manager. And I really, really struggled up there, because, you know, my fitness had dropped, and then you were only training twice a week. Once a week if you had a midweek game. Sometimes you didn't train at all, but you had to drive from Burnley to Morecambe to train, and I found it really, really hard work, and I just didn't feel up to the standard of playing at Morecambe. And then I got the opportunity to play for a couple of reserve games for Scunthorpe, which again I did, and I did all right. But you were that far down the pecking order, unless you were at something exceptional that was going to be better than what they already had. When their injuries recovered, you were never going to get. You're never going to get snapped up, and you know, sometimes you just have to accept that you're just not good enough for that standard. And then probably the next time I started enjoying football again was at Darwin in the Northwest Counties League, where I played under a guy called Ian McGarry, who a real character from Darwin. And I started enjoying football again at the Northwest Counties. And then, like Joe says, I joined the police, and they put a kibosh to that, just really because of the shifts, and you just couldn't commit to playing at such a high standard.
No, interesting, Tony. And it must be difficult, you know, pros that get released at 25, 26, you know, they've got a little bit of background, and, you know, with all respect, a little bit more worldly wise. You know, you've moved away from home, you're playing in this, you know, this town, and you're living there, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and you're still not 21.
That's right. Yeah.
But you've managed. You've got through all that side of it, and you've, you know, you've.
And I wouldn't change any of it, Jez. You know, like I said at the beginning, it's people set out for that dream. I'm proud to say I've played for Burnley. I'm proud to say I was a professional footballer. I've made some great friends, and I don't regret anything. I wish we'd have beat Hereford, but we didn't.
Also, Tony, you've got, you know, you can tell there's so much respect for you in your professional football life. I mean, there's one little story. I don't know if you two, Joes, if I've ever bored you with this story. We had, there was a group of us from the cricket club used to go away to watch test matches. So we'd plan it all well in advance, and we'd buy the tickets, and we'd organise transport or digs and food and drinks. You know, all that organisation was done all by me, because those lazy bastards were always just fucking it off on the piss. And we went to Headingley in, what do you think, Tony? Early 2000?
I think it was just before 99, I think, Jess.
All right, okay. So we went there, and on this trip, I think there were 6 went, but 2 came a little bit later. And me, Tony, my 2 brothers, Nicky and Matt, would always try and go for at least 2, if not 3 days, try and stop 2 nights, if not 3 nights. The first day was always a big day because, you know, you turned up there fresh. Benedictine for the first ball, Benedictine for the first wicket, etc., etc. So the second day was always a bit more difficult. And then on the third day, and we tried to get tickets for different parts of the ground. On the third day, we were beneath it was like a big glass-fronted area at Headingley, and we were on the front row of the stand. So you've got the concrete concourse in front of you, the footpath. And it's safe to say my brother Nicky was that rough, he could hardly move. But we managed to get him to the ground. And my other brother, Matt, decided that every pint we had, he would buy Nicky one. So Nicky's led on the floor with probably 4, 5, 6 pints lined up at the side of him. Why the stewards didn't move him, I don't know. So we're watching cricket. This is great. But I don't know if people remember, Joe Neenan is a really big friend of Ian Botham's. That's right. So we're sat there. These 2 people walk past in front of us, or 2 or 3 people walk past us, but they're actually the other side of the advertising hoardings. And one of them looks back at Tony and says, "Is that Tony Woodworth?" And Tony said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "It was, crikey, it's Joe Neenan." It was Joe Neenan. And what did he say, Tony? "Fucking hell, you've put some weight on that." Yeah. But just getting back to the statue Tony had, guess where Tony ended up? In the corporate box with those 2, having a few glasses of wine later on that day.
I can believe it. Tony, we have mentioned you on the podcast before. Joe Beneducci mentioned you because he argued that it was your greatest moment in a cricketing context.
For Lowerhouse. I didn't know you played with Michael Atherton, did I?
Well, I think this probably trumps it, to be fair.
Yeah.
You're playing at Todmorden.
Home to Todmorden, Joe.
At Lowerhouse.
Yeah, playing against Todmorden.
Yeah.
Joe Beneducci bowling, Tony.
Yeah.
If you can remember, walk me through it. Or run me through it, either or.
If I can remember, I remember everything about it, Joe.
Well, I'm ready.
Like I say, Joe, it was the 4th game in 2 weeks. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I was only picked because I think it was Charlie. Charlie got married.
I don't know why you were playing.
Could have been.
I think Charlie
got married in 2002,
married.
I'm sure he did, yeah.
I think Charlie got married, and that's why. And anyway, I got picked. So obviously I played second team cricket, but no disrespect to the second team, the ball never came through as much as it did in the first team, and the throws were never as accurate as in the first team. So my first game was at home against Ramsbottom, Michael Clark and co. And then the second game the next day was at Accrington.
Yeah,
and I took my gloves off after the Accrington game, and my hands had swollen up that much. I thought I was going to be deformed. Anyway, by the second week came, they'd settled down and just put it down to like bad technique. We played at Rishton and they flared up again. So I was really, really not looking forward to playing on the Sunday against Todmorden at home, but obviously never let anybody down. And Matt asked me to stand up to him, which again I didn't really fancy, but I did, and he just kept leaving the ball, and it just went straight into my gloves and right on the palms of my hand, which was swollen and sore. So what a relief when they brought Duke on. But Todmorden had a sub-pro called Clinton Peake, who I think was playing at Barnoldswick in the Ribblesdale League at the time. And he was an Australian guy from Victoria, and he was obviously a good bat. But he brought his girlfriend with him. Must have thought he was playing at a test match because she cheered and squealed every time he hit the ball, encouraging, go on, Clint, that's a great shot, Clint. He obviously misread one of Joe's and danced down the track. and I don't know who were more surprised, me or him, that this ball had stuck in my gloves and I managed to stump him. Bless him, rest in peace, but Paddy and Pete were sat on a bench, and all I heard Paddy and Pete shout was, "I can't believe he's done that." I don't know whether he meant Clinton Pete dancing down the track to Dukes or me catching one and something, but I don't think it was Clinton Pete's greatest moment.
It was interesting. I think it probably was Tony. I think it was Charlie's wedding, because I'm just looking at the scorecards there. Because what do you reckon to this, Joe M, the current first 11 wicketkeeper?
Yeah.
Tony played 4 games. 6th of July his debut, then 7th, then 13th and 14th. He didn't bat, which, you know, is not his fault, but we just about lost the first game, but won the next 3 with Tony in the side. So that's 75% win ratio.
Yeah.
The first game, he'd 1 caught, no byes. The second game, 1 caught, 2 byes. The next game, no caught, no byes. And the next game, 1 stump, no byes. So he's got 2 byes in 4 games and 75% win ratio.
Well, there's 2 things there, I would say. A very underrated wicketkeeper.
Right, good point.
I can, believe it or not, Tony, I can remember you playing in the first team.
Good.
One of the reasons, actually, because I could remember Stanley making his comeback. But I can remember you playing. And secondly, on your point, Jez, is why didn't he play more? I
think we had, Charlie was doing a fantastic job because, batter and a wicketkeeper. Tony was holding the second team together, really. I'm not sure what that was like, keeping it more as professional as possible. Yeah, it is a regret of mine that I didn't play with him more.
Had Frank stopped wicket-keeping at that point?
I think if I can just come in there, Joe, I think I was deemed more of a liability in the field than, without joking, than Frank would have been, to be honest.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, was it not the first game at Tomlin? Did he not do his knee? Did we not have a bit of a delay? An ambulance had to come on and oink Frank off to hospital.
He's not down there as playing. I mean, Frank went through a period, Joe, where it always seemed to be when we were playing Bay Cup that, there were various shouts came from the spectators. Frank was either brilliant or rubbish. So there was many a shout of, "What do they call your keeper? Greasy pair?" I think we've got symbols behind the stage. I think we're having a bit of a crisis of confidence, so that's why Tony came in. But just, going back to the Lowerhouse thing, Tony, you've done so well around the social activities. Those comedians we used to have some real banter there. And, and I know it will come back, get this lockdown out of the way. I'm sure we'll have other activities like that. Is there anything you want to mention about the social side of the club that you've been involved in?
No, I think it was something I've always enjoyed organising stuff. But my first involvement, I was invited as a guest to a sportsman's dinner that was held at the club. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Peter Stevenson was the speaker.
Oh, BBC.
Yeah, and I remember it vividly because that same day I had Stan had been and had his vasectomy. Or the day before, I should say. The day before, he'd had his vasectomy and I had taken him to hospital and then picked him up afterwards, and he was very, very, very poorly after the operation. But he'd bought me a ticket as a thank you and an introduction to the cricket club for this dinner. So we met at the club, and it was a great night. But if you remember the old club as it was, I bet we only had 60, 70 people in.
Yeah, Ken Smalley organised it.
That's right, Ken Smalley. But Stan had a few drinks and obviously still under the influence of the anaesthetic the day before, and decided to tell us and show us that one of his testicles was infected. And he was like Buster Gonad. Honestly, Joe, it was awful. And then when we spoke to Ken Smalley the next day, and he starts telling me how much we've made from this dinner. I'm thinking we can do better than that. And I think the rest is sort of history. Yeah. We took it away from the club. We got a few more. No disrespect to Ken, he did obviously a lot for the club. We got a bit of a younger committee together, and we took it. We went to the Kirby, and it suddenly became like the lifeline for the club. Did those dinners, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was also, I think if you remember, I don't know if Joe Beneducci was part of this. Joe Martin won't have heard this story. It was just went bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was the lifeline for the whole town. Once a year event that Tony Woodworth organised that we would have. And can you remember that, Dooch, when we had to ask all you rugrats to meal?
There were 6 or 7 of us who turned up to Kirby in our suits. We were having a pint in bar before dinner, and I can't remember who approached us. But sorry, lads, we've overbooked. Would you lads mind awfully if we gave you your money back and you disappeared? So I can't remember exactly where it would have been. Me, Gav, Charlie, Matt Stanning, Matt Marquis probably, who went around town in our. Johnny Russ. We went to Red Line in our suits, and we walked at Red Line, and there was nobody in. DJ went, bloody hell, lads, you could have just brought your bus pass. You didn't need to wear a suit, because obviously we're all suited up for Sportsman's dinner. So yeah, I do remember it quite well.
It was, Joe. I think the Kirby said we can cater for 240 or something. We sold 260 tickets, trying to blag an extra. Just share the meals out a little bit, and there are about 285 turned up. Speaker then, Tony, can you remember?
I think it was either the first one we did was Joey Jones or Frank Worthington.
Yeah.
It must have been Worthington, because I heard Joey Jones.
Yeah.
And obviously I wouldn't have heard the speaker that night.
Yeah, there were good times, Tony. And you did a lot for us then. And then you're such a personable type of lad. You're in touch with everyone. You don't fall out with anyone. You've got all these contacts that you've got, and you're still regularly in contact with Ryan Harris. Yeah.
I keep in touch with Ryan, and I've done ever since he first came over here. Again, a great lad, and I think it's fantastic that he always comes up to see us. And I think the club as a whole has always looked after the pros. I don't think any really pros have a bad word to say about the club, and when they do. But I think Ryan's a bit of an exception, isn't he? To say where he went to. Yeah. Without a doubt.
Been chatting just recently about the things crop up within these podcasts, and sometimes it's not put out there, on the format so everyone can listen to. But it would be great to get people like Ryan to come on and give us 15 minutes on this.
Yeah.
And Joe's going to have a look at Corbus doing it. So if you could do that, you get all.
Yeah, definitely.
But it'd be great to get him on.
Yeah, definitely. No.
I just noticed today that he apparently he's applied for the South Australia coaching position or something like that.
Has he?
It said on. I was looking briefly on Twitter at something.
I think from speaking to Ryan, I think he's got aspirations of taking that next step. I think he's been dealing with the under-19s recently, and I think he wants to take that next step and become a state coach, or if he ever got the opportunity to become the Australian bowling coach, and why not? Why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
He's had his RPL gigs, and he coaching wise.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget Tony. When we used to, in the early days when we used to work together, Tony used to have a number of football manager's jacket that he came to work in. One of those that went down past your knees, walking around Burnley like it was happy days.
Yeah. And Joe mentioned before getting dressed up to go to a street party on Cog Lane. Do you remember when me and you went dressed up, but it was on Melrose Avenue?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, the street party.
Yeah. Yeah, with Danny Devlin throwing tails at us.
Yeah. Different kind of suit though, Joe. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for giving me the time. And like I say, it's I hope people enjoy what they've heard and about my career. And I'm not ashamed of getting beat 6-0 by effort. Like I say, I'm proud to play for Burnley, a great club. And maybe an insight into what used to happen for the apprentices compared to what they get now. And like I say, I'm always open. If anyone has any questions they want to ask me about my football career, I'm not ashamed. I'm not shy. I'll tell it as it is.
Yeah, fantastic. Really appreciate that, Tony. It's been a real insight. And it might be something that the likes of Dick Stansfield and that group of players that maybe have a listen and see what it used to be like in the days.
Gordon, send Morehouse to save the house.
Tony, I was just going to ask you again. I should have asked you this at the time when you were talking about football, but Adam can knit it together if needs be. I just wondered if you hear about people talk about football clubs and drinking cultures. What if there's any evidence of that in your time at Burnley?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, it were nothing. Like I say, Joe, things have changed so much. They have dietitians now. They have, they get told when they can eat, what they can eat, where they can eat it. We had nothing at all like that. Like I say, the youth team never even had a coach. And again, there was probably a drinking culture. You were expected in them days after the first team game. The first team players were expected to go to the sponsors' lounge. You were expected to stay for an hour. Some overstayed it, me probably being most weekends. And then, again, you'd go from the sponsors' lounge to the Park View. And there was a massive drinking I wouldn't say a drinking problem, but I suppose when you look back as a professional sportsman, you shouldn't do it. But in those days, that's what it was. They had strict rules. You weren't allowed out 48 hours before a game. So if you were playing on the Saturday, obviously you weren't allowed out on a Thursday night. But best night in the Park View was a Thursday night, and Cats, Whiskers, and Annabella's, and it was. A lot of people did it. If you got caught, you got fined. But drinking was part and parcel of the game then.
And you living on Hollingrave Road was on your own corner.
Yeah. And by then, after my first year, I moved. Like I said, Phil Malley was a very good friend of mine, and his wife Deborah. I moved in with Debbie's mum and dad on
Mitella.
No, Clarence Street. It was just below the Woodman.
Right.
Just below the Woodman, and they were lovely people, fantastic to me. But the Woodman was very close.
Yeah.
And you'd think nothing of going for a pint because that's what it was. It's it doesn't happen now, and I understand why, and that's why they probably get paid so much more money because they're so much more dedicated. It's a totally different world.
Yeah, without a doubt. Joe Martin, anything?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you talk then about sort of dedication. But if you think about when you were coming through the ranks and you signed your first professional contract and stuff, and on the YTS scheme, I think. Yeah. Thousands of kids play football. Probably millions. But only a very, very small percentage actually end up becoming professional, and I think that it's a really interesting and an amazing story that you've discussed there. That was brilliant to hear. But also, I think it showcases how much commitment's needed to actually get to that level. Because I'm sure that there would have been, and this isn't a negative comment, but I'm sure there would have been other goalkeepers, Tony, that were of a similar level. But you obviously worked just that bit harder and got.
Yeah, and you're exactly right there, Joe. And with a mutual friend in Chris Blezard, who I'm sure was a very, very, very good goalkeeper. And I'm not saying he wasn't dedicated in goalkeeping, but you've just got to be in the right place at the right time. And I maintain that getting the opportunity to go to these places and clubs and actually sign. I was, obviously worked hard, and but I was in the right place at the right time. I've explained the unfortunate incident for Sean Goss. I bet he regrets that morning forever because I'm convinced he'd have got a professional contract, but something happened, and I was in the right place at the right time. And what you say now about kids today, I mean, they get signed up at 8-year-old, and the commitment that they have to show, the parents have to show for the numbers that actually get through, it's frightening. It's frightening, and unfortunately, they don't seem to, they get in with a Premier League club at such a young age, and they stay through there till they're 14, 15, and then if they don't get signed, it ruins it for the young lads who are in the level below. So you likes of, say they leave Burnley, but they get released from City United, they come to Burnley, Burnley then take the best of them, get rid of the kids that they've had through from kids to 14, 15, so they then go to the likes of Bolton and Wigan, and it's just a knock-on effect to, to suddenly you're nowhere. But kids, it's a dream for kids, and it's an understandable dream because the rewards are out there. But it's a massive commitment.
Yeah, owns it. Tony, that's been fantastic. Thanks very much for everything that you've done there.
I mean, there's only one quick story if you want to include it about the how we got into me doing the compare. Do you remember that one? We used to use Mike King all the time, didn't we? And we just used to pay Kingy for a comic speaker and a compare. And we had the one at the Irish League. And again, Kingy had told us the price, and we'd agreed it, and we turned up one day, and as we did, we made a day of it, didn't we? The organisers, we made we set up in the morning, a few pints in the afternoon, suited and booted, and then down to the dinner. And I don't know whether Kingy was comparing this one or he was the comic, but one of them didn't turn up. So whether it was the comic didn't turn up or the compare didn't turn up, so Kingy said he'll do it all. So when I went to pay him at the end of the night, thinking he'd give us a discount, he said, "Oh, no, I've done both jobs," and he wanted full money. Yeah. So I was an arsehole, and I said, right, I'm doing it next year. I'm comparing it next year, and you held me to it.
Yeah, it's right. And it kicked off his career.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah.
Never looked back.
Right, nothing else in chaps?
No, really good.
Brilliant, that. Thank you, Tony.
More than welcome anytime.